Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow orders to the letter to spite somebody. And in today's episode, HOA Karens are getting it. Guys, if you've ever had the displeasure of dealing with an HOA, this one's for you. The stories are so satisfying. I hope you enjoy them. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. My uncle is very much one of the coolest people I know. He crams every second of every day, enjoying all that life has to offer, from safari trips, to nature photography, to beekeeping, to tropical fish breeding, you name it. He's also the nicest guy you'll ever meet, willing to help anybody with anything at any time. But that said, one of his hobbies includes gardening, and he turned his giant backyard into a pollinator's paradise with flower beds enclosed by a small, short white picket fence. The ones that are like 6 inches tall and just used to keep the garden contained, but they're more decorative than anything. Now, having done well for himself in his life, he also happens to live in a snooty upper-class neighborhood with lots of trophy wife busybodies who can't mind their own business. As part of this snooty neighborhood, the HOA rules explicitly state no fences. Of course, they mean 6 to 10 feet tall fences around your property, not tiny fences around a garden bed. Either way, my uncle's neighbor Karen decides to take it upon herself to report my uncle to the HOA for having a fence. He got a letter from the HOA since I guess their interpretation did find my uncle in the wrong, and his response was to read the entire HOA bylaws to ensure that whirligigs weren't prohibited. If you don't know what whirligigs are, it's the lawn ornaments that look like a bird with spinning wings that make an awful constant clacking noise. They weren't, so my uncle up and replaced all of his garden fencing with these whirligigs. Dozens, if not hundreds of them, clacking at all hours of the day and night. It was quite a racket. My uncle's a nice guy though, so he took them all down after a few months, but I'm sure it humbled that awful neighbor of his. She never said anything to him or the HOA again, probably in fear of worse retaliation, like wind chimes or something. This is pure malicious compliance gold, guys. And I love the fact that the Karen stayed quiet after that. She definitely learned her lesson with that one. I only wish the uncle kept it up all year round to really be petty, but hey, win nonetheless, right? I've told a shorter version of this story in the comments somewhere, but it's probably worth its own post so we can all hate on HOA some more. I babysat and elder sat for the neighbors down the street who committed this malicious compliance, so I was there to hear the ranting as this whole mess went down. We'll call my neighbors Liz and Dave. They were nice folks who clashed with the Homeowners Association when the busybody president who lived next door to them, who we'll call Karen, got it in her rotted turnip for a brain that Liz and Dave had taken in an illegal renter. Now, renting out rooms was strictly against HOA policy, but they had not rented out a room. Liz's elderly mother had moved in with them after breaking her hip and being unable to live alone anymore. So what did Karen do? She sent them a very threatening letter about their unlawful renter and how fines would accrue if the unlawful renter didn't vacate immediately. The letter was accompanied by pictures of Liz's elderly mother taken through the windows of their house. Reap alert, right? They wrote back that there was no renter and they explained the situation. Of course, Karen did not believe that story, and she had the HOA lawyer start sending them certified letters about their continued violations with ever-increasing insane fines. This went over poorly. Liz and Dave got their own lawyer to fire back a cease and desist letter. After many increasingly aggressive back and forths, it all culminated into an association meeting, where Liz, Dave, Liz's mother came in with ID and birth certificates and basically made Karen look like the pimple on the backside of humanity that she was. They won, but Karen was furious and she swore she'd get them for something. She maintained until the day I left for college that Liz and Dave had forged those driver's licenses and birth certificates to keep their unlawful renter. Cut to the following fall. Liz and Dave needed to repaint the house after making some siding repairs post-hurricane. They carefully checked the HOA bylaws for approved paint colors, and they picked out a fairly bland shade of something between brown and tan. They gave the painters the color information listed in the bylaws, and the painting happened. So less than a week after their house was painted, they got another certified letter from the HOA lawyer stating their house was the wrong color. They fired back evidence that they ordered exactly what was in the bylaws. Well, after many back and forths, it turned out that the approved color and the swatches on file with the board no longer matched because the manufacturer had changed the colors in their line slightly due to some kind of formula change. Their house was a few shades darker than it should have been. See, the bylaws listed the manufacturer color information for convenience, but the shades actually had to match the official swatches that you could have theoretically borrowed from the board and gotten color matched. Nobody ever did that, but Karen was out for blood after the unlawful renter and forced them to have to repaint. Liz and Dave were taking no chances on the second try. They got the swatch set from the HOA, and for some reason, it made no distinction between the approved accent colors or house colors. Most houses in the neighborhood had brightly colored doors. So they decided that if they had to paint their house a second time, Karen, the dog that caught the car, could live next to the most garish option they had. It was pumpkin orange. The painters asked multiple times if they were sure, and they were very sure. You couldn't see the orange from the inside, but you sure could from next door. Karen, again of course, wouldn't stand to live beside a bright orange pumpkin house, and she made many attempts to object to this. But it was within the letter of the HOA rules, and the house stayed orange until long after I moved away. Oh boy, I only wish OP had a picture of that bright orange house because I would love to see it. And guys, you know what's so awesome about this? What's so wonderful about this malicious compliance is that Karen absolutely despised that bright orange house that she probably had to look at every single day, and she couldn't do a damn thing about it. And that's why you leave people alone, Karen. And let me tell you, if you enjoyed that one, oh boy, strap yourselves in for this next one, where an HOA Karen messes with a rich man and learns a lesson they won't forget. I lived in this town surrounded by magnificent vistas. There was a small development on the outskirts for upscale homes and mansions. Below the development were a few older homes. Many celebrities and business owners had vacation properties in the area, multi-million-dollar houses that they used maybe once a month out of the year. Real estate had always been at a premium. There was one older home amongst all these giant view lots. And this is when a new buyer came in, a guy who owned a slew of RV dealerships that had obscene amounts of money. So he bought the most prominent lot on top of the hill as you entered the development of maybe 20 lots. His project was a massive stucco structure with a multi-car garage and a much bigger RV garage with a huge roll-up garage door. Think of the biggest RVs you've seen, and he had a garage built for it with an automatic door. The house was a sand color with a red tiled roof, and the entire lot was tastefully landscaped with different kinds of rocks, small mounds here and there, and a few shrubs to be low maintenance. The back of the property was fenced in with an 8-foot or higher block wall. The fence itself was probably over $100,000. On to the Karen. His neighbor was a school teacher who had lived there before the development started, and he had a modest house. He had decided to take advantage of the skyrocketing land prices in the neighborhood and sell, except nobody wanted his crappy house when there was much larger empty lots available. He then decided that the real issue was the new behemoth that blocked his view, and that's why nobody wanted to buy his 3-bedroom ranch house at mansion prices. In reality, his home did not appeal to the market. So what did he do? He became president of the HOA, which included the older homes and the new development, and that's when the harassment starts. The HOA had formed after the RV mansion construction began, but the home was so big that it took almost a year to finish. The HOA then passed a design theme rule that all houses must be painted in a specific color palette, the predominant color being a taupe that was darker than this man's beige-colored stucco house. The palette included the taupe, and a selection of trim colors in pink, teal, or tan. It was intended to give the community a Santa Fe look and feel, which just happened to be the colors of the president's crappy house. The RV owner took the HOA to court, and the trial dragged on for a year. The guy never used the property, claiming it was still under construction during this time. He lost in court, and he had to repaint his property using only the approved colors. And this is where the malicious compliance comes in. So the guy brought out his contractor, and he had him repaint the entire property, the Pepto-Bismol pink trim color. and everything was painted this color. The house, the fence, the trim, the rocks in the yard, you name it. Then he had the massive driveway to the garage done in the same pink stamped concrete. Even the garage doors were pink. He then locked up the house and he never stayed there. The HOA was in an uproar because the house could be seen at the top of the hill for miles. None of the other lot owners broke ground, and the president's home did not sell for 2 whole years. And that's what it's like to have some serious FU money. Yeah, let's just build a multi-million-dollar property, repaint it pink, which is probably super expensive, and never live in it, just to spite the HOA Karens. Guys, I absolutely love how frickin' petty some people can get when it comes to getting back at others. And if you like petty, listen to this next one. My wife and I moved into a 64 townhome community that was 10 years old at the time. The HOA board was comprised of 5 members that were original homeowners when the community started, and they had been the sole board members since the community started. Their sense of entitlement was next level crazy. They thrived on their quarterly walkthrough with the neighborhood, and they would write up every single home for some kind of violation, regardless of how minor the offenses were. Everyone gets a violation letter. Our first letter, the first month living there, was that our garage door paint was starting to peel. It was like a 2-centimeter scrape where the panels met, and it needed to be repainted. The siding also needed to be power washed as there was a patch of green moss behind a bush. And also, the sliding door on the deck was dirty, and it needed to be washed. We had 30 days to fix the issues, or we would face a fee of $25 a day until they're resolved. So I asked around, and everyone gets these ridiculously petty letters every quarter. No matter what you did to maintain your townhome, you were going to get a letter about something. As this was going on, none of the major items in the neighborhood needed fixed were addressed. After a decade since construction, the ground had settled unevenly, and many homes had standing water issues where it wouldn't drain after a storm. The rainwater would sit for 5 to 7 days in people's lawns. And more importantly, there had been a legal fight with the town since the community was started about our road being dedicated, meaning the town was responsible for snow removal. Our HOA dues included paying for our own snow removal, which we shouldn't have to, and we were paying an attorney for 10 years to fight this with no resolution in sight. Fast forward 2 years, and a few of us had enough, and we decided to band together to replace the board at the next annual meeting. Well, the existing board got wind of this and hit us all with pages worth of issues with our properties, because if you have outstanding issues, you're not in good standing with the community. Thus, you can't run for a board position or even vote for those running. This petty move brought the community even closer, and we spent the weekend before the meeting helping each other clean out their HOA honey-do list. We took pictures, documented everything, and then we had the US mail certified delivery of each packet with the completed list and photos to the HOA board, who lived 75 feet away. Come board night, oddly enough, the lawyer was there to give an update that no progress has been made with the township on our dedicated road. He stuck around as we moved to the elections for the next board. We brought our signed petitions to add our names to the ballot. The board says we're not eligible, as we all have outstanding issues with our property. We call BS with our receipts from the post office that they received our completed list with documentation. They reply they haven't reviewed them yet. We tell them that's not our problem and that we're in good standing. The lawyer, overhearing this, states that we're eligible to be on the ballot if we can confirm the issues with our homes were resolved prior to the meeting. The HOA president glares at the lawyer, but the lawyer just shrugs, saying, "The rules are the rules." With the exception of the 5 existing board members voting for themselves and each other, we are voted in nearly unanimously to replace them. I lead the revolution because I was tired of the petty BS when there were real problems in the neighborhood. Sadly, the rest of the elected board members vote me as president, and I have no idea what I'm doing. But we spent the next few sessions removing all the dumb violations from most of the neighbors. We went through the bylaws to really focus on what's important. So what happens next? It ends up that the lawyer was a friend of the previous president, and he was in no hurry to resolve anything, as he was enjoying our excessive bill. So I notify him if it's not resolved in the next 6 months, we're finding new representation. He was actually good at his job when pressed to do it. He won the case, and the town appealed and tried to drag it out. He fast-tracked the appeal as it had been going on for 10 years, and we won the appeal too. The town dedicated our road, and then the lawyer pressed that it should have been done years ago. And it wasn't him slowing things down, but the town. He ends up getting us a settlement from the judge for back pay on us paying for snow removal that the town was responsible for. We end up using that settlement to have drains installed across much of the community to clear the standing water issues. With the money left over, we fixed a lot of the neighborhood issues that the HOA should have been doing the whole time. Fences and sidewalks in disrepair, replaced dead trees, shrubs, etc. It was great getting all that done without having to hit our capital reserve fund. I remained president until we moved a few years ago. Now we live in a new, larger development with a new HOA. I was asked to run for a position on it, and I replied, not an effing chance. But I will lead a coup d'etat if I need to. Edit. As to the original HOA president, a 50-year-old male, he wasn't actually eligible to be president. He wasn't on the mortgage. The townhome was in his mom's name, and nobody knew because he held the books. So being the vengeful leader at the next annual meeting, I wait until ex-prez shows up with his petition to try to get his position back. I then tell him in front of the 60+ other homeowners that he can't even be at the meeting, let alone vote or be on a ballot, as his name isn't on the property, but his mom is eligible if she wants to. Talk about getting embarrassed, right? The extra info at the end that the guy couldn't even be president in the first place is the icing on the cake. And that was satisfying as heck, guys. And I think we can all agree that nothing is more annoying than entitled HOAs on their power trips. Well frickin' done, OP. So when I was in high school, back in the late 90s, one of my teachers shared a story with the class in order to explain why we'd have a substitute teacher the next week. And this is by far my favorite story in the vein of malicious compliance. My teacher was in his late 30s, and he was married for only a couple of years. And over the summer, he and his wife bought their first house together. As is typical, the house was in a development that had an HOA. While he wasn't thrilled at the idea of a meddling HOA, it is a necessary and unavoidable evil. He went through their set of rules with a fine-tooth comb and decided that while there was some stuff he wasn't a fan of, overall he could live with it. So they signed the papers and bought the house. About a week after they move in, they get this non-compliance letter, stating that the tree in their front yard was not approved and must be removed. Now, the problem is, the tree was native to that spot, and it was estimated at 80 to 100 years old, and it was a pecan. I mention the type for two reasons. First, a pecan produces nuts, obviously, and that's why the HOA said it couldn't be in the front yard. After all, a lawnmower flings a rough pecan through a neighbor's window. There will be an issue. The second issue is that this was in the Dallas, Texas area. The pecan is the state tree of Texas, and as such, it gets a little legal protection. Basically, to cut one down, you have to have a permit, and to get that permit, you have to show the tree is diseased or a hazard. Just being in the way is not sufficient. My teacher is upset as the tree is large, provides a lot of shade, and he likes eating pecans. So he writes back to the HOA, who turn a deaf ear, and point to the set of rules and refer him to their legal team for further questions. He then contacts the county and state, who both come back with he can't remove the tree without a permit, or he will face a large fine and/or jail time. He copies that letter and sends it along with his own letter in a certified envelope to the HOA lawyers. The lawyers come back that the rules are binding. He's not allowed to have fruit or nut-producing trees in his front yard, but ornamental trees or flowers in flower pots, this part's important, are fine. They state if it isn't removed in 30 days, they'll begin fining him. At this point, he gets his own lawyer and he turns it over to him. A couple of months go by, and we're to the part of the story where he's explaining why there's a substitute. He'll be going to court to have a judge weigh in on the matter. The next week comes, and after the court hearing, he comes in and says that basically he lost, as the judge ruled that the rules did apply and the tree had to go. However, since it was a native tree at the time of development, the HOA would be responsible for all costs of removal, not him as the homeowner. Now, most people probably would have let it go at this point. Sure, you lost the tree, but it isn't costing you anything. Not my teacher, though. This man decides that it was time to protest the overreaching HOA and their absurdity, so he got to reading. After going through every single rule thoroughly, he took a trip to Home Depot, and he bought some hose, fittings, and a nice toilet. He set the toilet up in the middle of the yard, right where the tree had been, and he ran the hose and fittings to his outside faucet, so it was hooked up for water. He then dumped some potting soil into the bowl and planted some decorative flowers. It took a few weeks, but the non-compliance letter came in stating that he had house waste in the front yard, and it must be removed within 72 hours or he will be fined. He then wrote back that there was no house waste. They responded again, and he stated they need to come show him where this supposed waste was. The next day, an HOA guy comes out and he points right at the toilet, and he says it can't be there. This is an eyesore. To which my teacher responds, "I'm sorry you feel that way about my self-watering flower pot, but I see nowhere in the list of rules that state what style of flower pot is or is not allowed." The HOA guy then gets verbally heated and he threatens to call the cops, to which my teacher agrees. Having his bluff called, the HOA guy leaves. A week or so goes by, and the class I'm in is pestering our teacher every day for new stories on this. He said he got a letter from their lawyers, which he sent straight to his lawyer. His lawyer agreed with him that the HOA rules in no way, shape, or form puts any qualifiers or limitations on flower pots, and as the flowers are clearly visible, it doesn't constitute debris or trash in the yard. A few back and forth things happen between the lawyers, and then the HOA moves for a trial, which gets the same judge as before. The judge reviewed the case and dismissed it as frivolous. He did put in his remarks or decision, something along the lines of, while the defendant's choice of flower pot is eye-raising and isn't traditional, there is nothing illegal about his use of a commode as art in his yard. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate any sound reason that this would violate existing rules and bylaws of their association. So yeah, that's how my teacher defeated the HOA. Guys, reading this post, I'm actually surprised and kind of annoyed that the HOA actually allowed OP's teacher to buy the house, knowing that there was a 100-year-old tree in the front yard, which is a selling feature for sure, and then after closing made them remove it. Like, that is some weird as heck BS right there. And I'm sure the last owners had to deal with that as well. Maybe that's why they sold the place. I'm just glad they had to pay for the cost in the end, and the teacher wasn't on the hook for the tree removal. But seriously guys, HOAs are evil. Forcing somebody to remove a 100-year-old tree, all to conform to the neighborhood standards, is just dumb, but we all know that, right? And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, it's in our /entitled people episode, your favorite, where psycho Karens are trying to steal people's husbands, and it backfires so hard. Go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.